Okie dokie. Hi, everyone. A special bonus episode of the Beyond Trauma podcast featuring yours truly. I wasn't expecting to do this, but it feels kind of good to get on and chat, one on one or hopefully one on 1 million viewers, listeners. So reason I'm popping on today is to encourage everyone to go to my Instagram, Lara Land Yoga, and check out the cover of my forthcoming book, The Essential Guide to Trauma Sensitive Yoga: How to Create Safer Spaces for All, due out for Shambhala Publications this May. The cover is there. It is, in my opinion, just gorgeous. They used the colors and energy that I gave them and that they felt from reading the book. So I'd love to hear what you think. Why don't you go ahead and leave me a comment under the book cover there on my Instagram. Leave me a comment, and tag someone, share it with someone you know, and we'll see about getting someone a copy of the book now on pre-order. So yeah, do that. Go to Lara Land Yoga and write me a comment about the book cover and tag someone there that needs that book and needs to see it, and someone is going to get a copy of my book. So I thought, since we were doing this little drop and this breaking news podcast, that I would take the time to speak a little bit about the process of writing the book. And I know people are always interested in that, and getting the book deal, and just what you might find in there. So the book, something that I decided for sure, I guess, that I was going to do pre-pandemic. I remember very close to lockdown that I was writing the book proposal. And big thanks to my friend Jivana, who wrote the Accessible Yoga book, and connected me with some folks at Shambhala. And because I felt like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can write a book too. And I had all this information from teaching trauma-sensitive yoga and training yoga teachers in trauma sensitivity, and all the work that we've been doing with the nonprofit 3.5 Acres Yoga for, really, it really goes back a decade. And I thought, if I could just get, my whole brain of information down into a book, it could be a great resource for yoga teachers or practitioners or folks who are interested in self-development, in surviving traumas and thriving after traumas, in any kind of embodied practices, folks interested in service, or anyone interested in, just the nonprofit world, what we've been doing. So that's what I did. I wrote a book proposal, and I sent it along with a chapter of the book over to Shambhala, my awesome editor, Beth Frankel, and they decided to offer me a contract on that book. And so then, I spent good chunk of the pandemic in my laundry room, which is kind of down some stairs. Like, I always call it the basement, on kind of like a cold floor, sitting on some cushions with my laptop up on a space heater, blaring hot air at me. And then usually writing, like 5 in the morning, very tired. And just trying to be quiet and hide from my very young child, who, was usually sleeping, but often would wake up looking for me. So most of it was written down there. When I think about writing the book, I think a lot about being down there in my cave down there. There's a bed down there too. Sometimes I would move to the bed and write from the bed. And It was a process. I think anyone who's written a book will tell you that it is a process. Sometimes I just had to write and write and write, and get stuff out. There's whole chapters that didn't make it into the book. Sometimes it was excruciating to just expound on one thing that I just wanted to write in one sentence, but I knew it needed more. Um, there were times I felt really lost and confused, but I pretty much did what they tell you to do, which is just keep on writing. Just writing, whether you want to or not, every day writing. And I remember, I gave myself, I think it was a year to write the book. Um, I had the deadline, and I remember my husband saying, you have time. Why are you putting so much pressure? And I'm like, I know how time goes. And it definitely did. When it got down to just a few weeks before the book was due, I felt behind and anxious and a lot of feelings. That's the time that I was out in the woods in the Berkshires camping. And um, I did get the book in on its deadline, but we decided to extend it anyway, so that I could do some more with it, work with another editor, and just take some pressure off. And also because my editor, Chamala, recommended releasing it at this time. She's looking at what books are coming out each season and just how to shed the book in the best light at the right time. So I hope you feel like it's going to be the right time this May. I do. My birthday's in May, and so I generally love that month and hope to be leading tons of workshops around trauma sensitive yoga service. Um, and we also talk about identity and yoga and blind spots. And so I just got back from a training a bunch of yoga teachers and some practitioners in Kentucky, where we discussed these topics, the role of yoga teachers and the self-work that we need to do on our own trauma, our own blind spots, our own patterns before, trying to go out and become missionaries with this yoga thing. And, thinking about the other things that folks might need first, or thinking about the oppressive institutions that maybe could use some yoga, could benefit for some yoga, the folks with kind of narrow vision, right? Because yoga helps us get more expansive in our thinking. It calms our nervous system and actually affords us more choices. When the nervous system is calm, it's expansive. Our prefrontal cortex actually comes online, so we can reason, we can think, we get ideas. And when we're stressed, we get tunnel vision, right? Literally and figuratively, we get narrow-minded, we get binary. So, yeah. So when you look at anyone in that kind of binary, reactive state, yoga can be very helpful. So this is a lot of the stuff that we work on and talk about in training, and mirroring back, like looking back at ourselves, and the systems we're a part of and creating, and how yoga could be helpful for changing our thought patterns, limitations, and there's a lot more that we do with that training. So if you're interested in learning about trauma sensitive yoga, in bringing a trauma sensitive yoga teacher training to your yoga studio, please reach out. You can always reach out to me at lara@landyoga.com, or DM me at Lara Land Yoga. And, I'm really responsive, and we can talk about a program that's right for you. And I'm hoping to do a lot of those, especially in spring and summer and fall of 2023, and then come and sign some books. And I would just say that the trainings and the book break down every element of trauma sensitive yoga, from room setup, um, lighting, just all the factors to take into play to make a safer experience, and deeper into what creates safety, both inner experience of safety and outer experience of safety, um, and how to create that for your students in any atmosphere, whether it's a for-profit yoga studio or whether you're giving some yoga in a food bank. Um, just a lot of little things that we can do with setup, with our bodies, with our language, with our cueing, our yoga cueing, to make the yoga more trauma sensitive, and even just how you define yoga. This is a big part of what we look at in the training and in the book. It's like how your definition of yoga and what you see in your mind when you hear that word, which I know you got a flash image, right? Like, that's put there, that is put there, and it's more than worth it to sit down and journal about and think about that image of yoga that might come to your mind and what you really believe and want to believe about what is yoga. What is yoga? And why are we involved in this practice? Because whatever you believe, you can't fake vibe, right? I think, people know, they feel if you're trying to correct them, and why. So why are you? Get clear on what's your definition of yoga. And I offer up some older, historically based definitions of yoga, and then also my own definition of yoga in the book. And as a kind of idea, you don't have to use my definition, but I suggest that you really define your terms. And, if you're listening and you're like, yoga, you're not a yoga teacher, but whatever it is that you're doing or whatever your mission is, get clear about your terms, because language is important. And what someone will ask you down the line, like, what do you mean when you say trauma? What do you mean when you say yoga? What do you mean when you say somatics? Whatever you're working on. It's clear. It's important to get clear about it. And then everything really derives from there. The way that you behave derives from how you feel about these things and what you think the purpose of them is. So we look at that a lot. And that's going to shape everything in the yoga room, actually. I share a little bit about my personal story in the book. Not too much, but a little bit. Maybe more in the next book. Hint, hint. And I share a lot of great quotes. That was also something where I kind of wrote the book first with all my knowledge and all the things I've been teaching and all the lessons that I've learned from working with so many different bodies over the years, 20 plus years, getting older. And then I kind of went back and looked at, who are my influences, who am I reading, and started weaving them in, and just sharing where, a lot of us in this field, in this space, are in alignment. So, I'm just excited to also thank, acknowledge, and include words from like Hala Corey, who was the first person on this podcast, from Susanna Bakatarki, from lots of quotes in there from different sources. Some more in the yoga space, some more in the service space, some more in the in kind of Buddhist philosophy spaces. Lots of good voices in there. And then, four or five really stories in there from my students, graduates of the 3.5 Acres Trauma Sensitive Yoga Teacher Training who have gone on to be teachers and teaching trauma sensitive yoga, and their stories are just magnificent. Their own transformations through their practice and how they're sharing that with others. And so you'll get different ideas from Tim, who introduced yoga to his mom through really needing to get her through COVID in the hospital. So breathing, talking her through breathing so that she could literally make it from her bed to the restroom, and how that experience brought them closer and opened up her mind to yoga, which is something she may not have accepted in her world before. You'll hear from Samantha, who was on the podcast earlier, who had that horrible motorcycle accident and lost her leg beneath the knee, and how the practice has stuck with her and helped her through that, as well as earlier trauma. I quote Marcy, who was on the podcast last season. We have in the book the story of one of our teachers who's in her 70s and doing the yoga practice with her sisters who are older and in assisted living. So just a lot of wonderful stories. Nikki, oh my gosh, I cannot forget Nikki. She's in there. She is living with MS and surviving and thriving, and she uses a lot of different techniques in her teaching. So we include a lot of her inspiration in there. So there are sequences, there are stories, and it's just a wealth of information from a lot of different angles. And there's a bonus in there to a bonus sequence for people who pre-order the book. So with restorative, trauma sensitive sequence with Pratibha, whose story is also in the book. So there's a lot in there. I hope something for everyone. The science of trauma, the kind of science around yoga and trauma, why yoga works, how it can help, be resilience. What is that really? How do we look at it in a communal sense? The what are resources? How does that influence healing from a trauma, and different kinds of traumatic events, how they impact us differently, and how having resources can impact whether we can heal from those traumas, and starting to really see that not everyone is in the same circumstance, and that makes a difference. What you can look for in the yoga room to see, maybe there's trauma in the yoga room that you weren't aware of. So how you can, sense into if you have a survivor there in the space with you and be sensitive to them. Just a ton of information, how to become a really excellent yoga teacher, which means to me a trauma sensitive yoga teacher, how to really excel at that, how to refer out when things are not in your scope. So that's a little bit, that was more than I thought I was going to say, but just share what's in the book. Why not? And anyway, please go check out the cover. I really hope you like it. Hint, it features my favorite colors. And you can go see that now on my Instagram at Laura Leanne Yoga. Make sure to follow me if you aren't following. And then make sure you send me a comment what you think about the cover, and tag a friend, and I'm gonna get someone a copy of that book. I mean, why not? I'm the author, right? Okay. All right. I'll see you over on my Instagram. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your love and support.